All right, well, we're going to get started because we have a lot to talk about. And please use the chat. Meri's going to talk a little bit about housekeeping details in a couple of minutes, but just want to welcome everybody here. This is a Saturday. You could be doing a lot of different things. And so we're really excited you decided to share part of your Saturday with us. We're very, very, very honored and very pleased about that. We're going to talk a little bit about taking steps into adulthood, and we call It's Complicated, and of course it is. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about me so you'll know who's talking to you, since we're not all in the same room and we can't share in the same way that we would if we were together. So I'm the director at an organization called PAL, the Parent Professional Advocacy League. We're celebrating our 30th year this year, and we are a family-run organization in Massachusetts. And I'll tell you a little bit more about PAL in a minute. But right now, sticking to stuff about me, I have two adult sons, the oldest of whom has a significant mental health issue. The younger one has some other issues too, including ADD. And they both taught me in different ways a lot about taking that step from being a teen into adulthood. And in my infinite free time, I foster dogs for a rescue, mostly Labrador retrievers and mixes, and I fostered at this point 17 of them. Meri?
Great. So a little bit about me. Hi, everyone. My name is Meri Viano. I'm the Associate Director at PAL. I'm the parent of 3 young adult children that have wonderful strengths and have had very unique situations with both trauma and mental health. And they range from ages 22 to 26. And I'm currently raising an amazing grandson who has been really involved with this pandemic COVID time, who is 2 years old. I absolutely love the beach. So a shout out to Lori and Beth. Maine is my place to go. I'm really thankful for the New England states being close, but I will go to any lighthouse or beach wherever I go. So really excited to be here with you today and talk more with you. And I'm going to hand it over to Dev.
Good afternoon now, everybody. So my name is Dev Kaplan. I am the youth coordinator for Parent Professional Advocacy League and Youth Move Massachusetts. I joined this wonderful organization November 17th, 2020. I've worked with many transition age youth over the past year, and one word that describes my relationships with most of them is trust building, for sure. And in my free time, I am a performing artist.
All right, so this is a little bit about what we're going to talk about over the next hour plus, hour to hour and a half. First, we're going to talk about some quick facts about young people and their parents. We think there's a lot of misperceptions, and you'll see after we talk about those quick facts how they relate to the findings of the survey that we did a year ago. And we're going to go over the 7 top findings. There's a lot of findings, but we're going to try to make that sort of more simplified so that we can just talk about those specific areas. And then I'm going to hand it over to Meri, and Meri's going to talk about how do we use that information and what we now know to shift thinking and to change policy and to change practice. Because often if you change policy, practice doesn't change right away. You have to work on all fronts. And then nobody does this work alone. So how do we form alliances in order to be able to do that work? So I said I'd tell you a little bit more about our organization, and we are PAL, the Parent Professional Advocacy League, and our goal primarily is to promote opportunities for family voice to be in everything and every place that families and youth are affected. So we want families to become leaders. We want to make sure that they are invited and welcomed at all the conversations about them and about their families. And one of the things I talk about fairly often when I'm out there doing this work is that family organizations are an important strategy for boosting family participation. You can ask one lone family in one lone town in your state, but that doesn't really do too much to shift to having more family participation. It's working with family organizations in order to be able to get that family voice out there. Meri?
Okay, so I would love all of you to get your cell phone close. And if you're on your cell phone, I'm going to walk you through this. For those of you, and you've probably been to a few of the sessions so far, but just a reminder for background noise, if you could keep yourself on mute, that really helps us. We would love for you to share your thoughts, things that come up as we go through this presentation in the chat. I will be able to offer insight to what people are saying live today. So we would love to hear from all of you. If you want to ask a question, please raise your hand. You'll notice at the bottom of your screen, there's the reaction. And if you want to practice, you can put a thumbs up, you can do a heart, a smile, kind of a celebration. That's something that you would also find where you raise the chat is. And we encourage you to use the Zoom reactions as we go through the data and as both Devin, Lisa, and I talk about different pieces. If you agree with it, if you see that with the young adults also that you're supporting and parents, as parents. We're going to go through a few polls. So if you can get out your cell phone, I would love for you to do this now. You're going to put in pollev.com. So POLLEV.com. And when that comes up, you're going to see where you put a username, and the code is Lisa Lambert 908, all one word. And I'll put this in the chat box as well, but Lisa, L-I-S-A, Lambert, one word, L-A-M-B-E-R-T 908. And as we go through the slideshow, there's going to be opportunities for you to make choices, and then you would hit join. If you have any technical difficulties, just send me a message in the chat and I'll walk you through that. Great. Okay, so here's the POLLEV. Yep, Beth, it's right there, .com. And it should say right after that, when you're joining, it says poll everywhere, join presentation. You're going to enter in all one word, Lisa Lambert 908.
All right.
And then hit the blue button that says join.
Oops, I thought we had a, no, I guess not yet. Okay, so we're going to be doing that polling after, sort of in a few minutes. But first, I'm going to turn this over to Deb, who's going to begin that conversation about quick facts that we know about young people. Go for it, Deb.
So, how have young people changed? These are a couple true or false questions. Most young people move out on their own by their early 20s. True or false?
And you can put a true or false in the chat if you want to.
True. But 1/3 live at home and many return home and stay about 3 years. More trusting of others than boomers? True or false? False. 40% of boomers say most people can be trusted, while only 19% of millennials do.
So Deb, if you could speak up a little bit more, just to kind of make sure. Okay.
Can you hear me better? I'll move closer to the camera.
That's much better. Thank you.
No problem. How have young people changed? Less likely to marry at a young age. True or false? Got a couple falses in the chat. Yes, it is true actually that just 26% married, while in the 1970s 80% married in their 20s. And the last one, less likely to get a good paying job at a younger age. Is that true or false? Let's see what the answer is. True. 41% have incomes less than $30,000.
So remember these facts, because as we compare to our group of young people and their families, and also what people's perceptions are, we're going to sort of get some contrast going there. So how have parents changed? And there was a study I'm drawing from by Karen Fingerman in 2017, and we have some true or false questions that came from her findings. So she talked to parents and she asked them, do you have more contact with your young adult children? And true or false, what do you think they answered? And it was true. Parents reported that they have, almost all of them, 90-something% reported that they have contact at least once a week with their young adult children, and 50% connected every single day. So that's going to be important when we talk about our findings. She also asked, parents, do you provide more financial support, you think, than maybe your parents did? And they said, yes. And it turns out when you look at the financial data that's collected by various groups, that until about 20 years ago, parents were more likely to provide financial support to their teens. Now they're more likely to take that money that they have that provides support, and it's littler kids. I guess their needs have grown or whatever the reason might be there, but also they provide more financial support to their young adult children than previous generations did. The next thing that she asked about was whether parents provided non-material support more often than they used to. And again, that's true. And it could be childcare. It could be making appointments because the young person isn't sure how to do that through the portal, or listening to them and giving advice. And then she said, how do you feel towards your child? Do you have more negative feelings, you think, than maybe your parents did? What do you think? Is that true or false? And it's false. Most parents said that their emotional bonds with their young adult children are stronger than ever, but they do have some ambivalence. So we wanted to start with these facts and then ask you, when does a child become an adult? And hopefully you have your cell phone and you are on there and you can select one of the answers. When does a child become an adult?
So we've got several different pieces coming up. You can choose A, 18, B, 21, C, it varies, and D, never.
Exactly.
And again, if you cannot get the poll, we'd love to hear. So we've got people in here that say 21 in the chat box. A few people. C, it varies is coming up also in the chat box.
Because it makes a difference. If you think your child is an adult at a certain age, you might approach how you offer support and or how you don't. So it makes a big, big difference. All right. So, Meri.
So it's really interesting. It varies, really kind of came up at 86% with our poll today. So when does a child become an adult? So this is pieces just to keep in mind. And again, it's going to vary state by state, but in age 14, a child gets a work permit. You can set up an IRA. Age 15 and 16, the driver's license, learner's permit, and also work as an adult. Age 17, I remember this mattering, seeing rated R movies. We know that now there's some different pieces with M components that are there, but C rated R films, join the military with consent. Age 18, those are the bigger numbers that come up: sign legal contract, take out a loan, consent to medical procedures, including in some states tattoos. Vote and hold public office, the ability to buy porn, smoke cigarettes, buy property, and males register for draft. Age 21, again, purchase liquor, buy a firearm, even adopt a child at age 21. And at age 25, in some states, to rent a car. And for some, they may pay a fee, but that liability of being able to rent a car from services is also available. So interesting to really think about as we think about children becoming adults.
So it's not all one answer.
Parents also take many roles, and we all know this that are here in this today. It's not a yes or no question. Parents can provide different kinds of support and involvement, from medical history, giving information of what the journeys look like to be on hand, filling in the facts often for our young adults. Level of involvement can change as the young person gains experience, and Dev will talk a little bit about also being at different places in your journey of wellness. And then culture plays a part also. I know in some of the families that we support, we talk to families that do not believe that a child should have a job at age 14, not till after 18, because within their family culture, they need to do the work within the home. So another piece to really keep in mind.
And I just want to add a little story to the culture piece. About 5 years ago, I was at a training for providers who were working with young adults. And one of the providers, it was in a place that was a really high percentage of Latinx families. And one of the providers was complaining that the mother kept calling her 20-year-old son, my baby, my baby. And he said that really got in the way. That was a really big problem. The mother didn't respect the son and just had a lot to say about it. So I took that little anecdote back to my office where we have a lot of cultures in our office. And somebody was there and she's from Colombia. And she said, in my culture, we call them my baby, whether they're 20 or 30 or 50. She said that has nothing to do with that. So there was a real misinterpretation of the language and of the thinking from those families. So something to educate others about.
And
So we have
Danielle
poll.
also mentions in the chat box, Lisa, it's really interesting on why at 18 we consider a legal adult, but the brain on average isn't fully developed till 25. So again, Danielle, really a great piece that we're often thrown into. Thank you for that share.
Exactly. And that's what the car insurance companies are looking at when they often don't let people rent a car until they're 25. They were ahead of a lot of people. So we have another poll. So if you can get your cell phones one more time before we go over the findings of the report. And do you think that young people ages 14 to 27, because those were the ages in our study, hope for the same things? Some of the time, most of the time? What do you think?
So we've got a few B's in the chat box. We've got, let's see, it keeps moving. A few more B's in the chat box, almost 5 in the chat box for some of the time.
Some of the time seems to be the clear winner of what people think about young people and their families hoping for the same things. All right, so I just want to do a really quick sort of background of what I call family-driven research. So, and the term was really developed by Trina Osher, who was one of the original people at the National Federation. And she did a lot of policy work and introduced me to this whole concept many, many years ago. So family-driven research is focused on capturing the experience of families and youth who've been impacted, in our instance, by behavioral health needs. But if your family ties are another group, it could be medical needs. But the goal is to capture the experience of families and youth. We choose topics that are important to families and important to youth. Last year, we did a survey about what do you think about telehealth shortly after the pandemic had struck. We've done surveys about what do you think about medication. And so we always choose the topics based on what's coming up for families and youth. It's not some sort of, remote idea that would be a really good thing to do research on. We have families and youth collaborate in developing the questions. We often pilot them. For this particular youth survey, which Deb is going to talk a little bit about, we had a group of 8 or 9 youth who sat down and tweaked all the questions with us and eliminated some and added others. They can be involved in getting that questionnaire out so we get more answers. And they also are there to be able to use the results and advocate for change because it frequently resonates with their own experiences. And then families and family-run organizations can use that data to develop advocacy goals and steps. And I will tell you, we've been doing surveys for quite a long time, and every single survey, families write, and the open-ended question at the end, thank you for asking us. No one's ever asked our opinion before. And that has been very, very consistently there. So for this survey, what we did is we did 2 surveys. We did a survey of parents from January to July, and 354 families responded to that. And we did a survey of youth and young adults from July to September. So they were back to back in the same year. And 136 youth and young adults responded to that. Now, as we go through the slides, I have highlighted the things that are pretty different about what you said and what parents said in orange. So we don't actually talk about that particular thing because we're going to try to pick some things out to talk about. I just want to make sure you get your eye drawn to that so you can see that difference. And you might have an opinion. If you have an opinion about why that's different, we'd love you to put that in the chat. So the youth that we talked to or got responses from, and the parents we got responses from, had youth age 14 to 27. And we tried to like encompass all those different, age ranges that people use for transition. The majority of parents and the majority of youth said that their child had a high school diploma or they were working on it. And that could be that they were younger. If they're 14, 15, they're working on it. And it could be that they were getting a GED or high sec or whatever the test is that in your state that would be the high school diploma equivalent. It was very interesting that most of them said their child was on behavioral health meds as well. You can see that there is a big discrepancy between how many parents said their child had been in an IEP or a 504, with how many youth said that they were on an IEP or a 504. And Deb and I talked about that, and we're not quite sure. We're still trying to parse that out, but it's possible a young person doesn't know they're on a 504 if they're not required to go to the meetings or if they decline to go to the meetings. And so that may be sort of like in the background. One of the most interesting things that we track over time is we ask the same questions, the same demographic questions in every single survey. And we do about one survey every year. And we ask the parent to identify the child's gender identity, and we ask the youth to identify their own gender identity. And that has risen from like 3% when we first started asking would be the non-binary category, so male, female, non-binary. That has risen on the parent side to 14%, on the youth side to 1 in 5. If you follow the works of Caitlin Ryan over at the oh gosh, I'm forgetting her center in San Francisco. She says that this is what one would expect because there's so much more open conversation, and then there are so many different categories where youth can describe themselves. They don't have to say that they're gay, lesbian, or bisexual. They can say, I'm pansexual, I'm gender fluid. There's a lot of different ways to describe your gender identity. So as that terminology gets out there and people can say, yep, that describes me best, then that category of non-binary LGBTQ plus is probably going to grow. And then remember what we said about 33% had kids living with them, young adults living with them, but many said their young adults came back. Was much higher for this group. 3/4 of the families said their child lived with them, and 2/3 of the youth said that they lived with their parents. So the first finding area we're going to talk about is healthcare. And we asked specific questions about getting help and getting prescriptions, making appointments, or getting medication refills. And on the parent side, we said, who makes the appointments? Who's the one in charge of making appointments or getting meds filled? And parents said, I'm the one who calls the pharmacy 56% of the time. 64% they said, wow, I'm the one who calls the doctor. And they reported that the young people only 13% of the time took the lead and did that. And we asked them, is your child glad that you helped them? And interestingly enough, almost 2/3 said, yeah, my child's really glad. Dev?
So the young people said that their 46% of them checked off the box that their parents call the pharmacy. 44% parents call the doctor office, and 37% say I do it. So 37% is the lowest one out of all these three. Personally, when times were difficult for me, and when I was struggling, my mom took charge of the pharmacy and doctor appointments, and I was tremendously grateful for all the help. As I got healthier, I took over making my own appointments. But the fact that the pressure was taken away from me, organizing all my medicines and appointments, allowed me the opportunity to focus on myself and heal. It helped me to not have to have the responsibility of all of that at that particular hard time in my life when I was going through mental health struggles. But there are different situations for everybody. Are you glad for your parents' help with medical professionals? 59% said really glad they help, and 13% said I take the lead but use their help.
So the next area we asked about was money. It's always a hot topic, right? I love this picture. I have to say, I found this picture online, and this is supposedly a first-year college student with his first credit card. So it's like, yes, it's mine. So we asked questions about whether families provide financial support and help about managing money. And remember, a lot of them did in the general population when we looked at those numbers at the beginning. So when we asked parents, what are your child's sources of income? The number one answer was, I give them money. I give them money on a regular basis. So parents also gave money for emergencies, and a number of young people got benefits. So this would be the older ones, or maybe the younger ones, who got SSI or other benefits. And only 1 in 5 had a part-time job, according to their parents. And we said, how would you rate the financial skills? And overwhelmingly, parents said, they're really not very good. Their financial skills are just really not very good. Dev?
Young people checked off that for their, what are your sources of income? They checked off, 39% of them checked off part-time job. Personally, I have a part-time job, and I do performing arts on the side. I'm also very, very good about how I spend my money as well. Personally, it also kind of helps tremendously that I don't drink alcohol or smoke. That saves me a lot of money. SSI or benefits, 27%, and get money from parents on regular basis, 26%. It's great to have parents that do that. Mine personally helped me a lot with financial situations too. Get money in emergencies, 21%. So a fifth. That's pretty good. How would you rate your financial skills? 24% checked, very good. Skills varied depending on my mood, 22%. And a quarter said not good.
And you'll see there's a huge difference between what youth said about not good and what parents said about not good.
Right, 54% said that they are not good at all, but 25% of the youth said that they are also not good. Yeah.
Exactly. So again, if we go back to the original data that was just about all young people not having any kind of needs at all, many of the families said they gave more money or financial assistance to their young adults than they did to their teens. And so we see that shift nationally, and then I think it's reflected a little bit here. And I do want to tell just very quickly, Meri and I both worked with somebody who's not with our organization anymore. And when her son was going to become 18, she said, I don't understand this. She says, they go to bed 17 and they wake up the next morning and they're 18. She says, do people think that they suddenly have all of the skills and knowledge put in their brain overnight? She says they don't. They're the same person, and they're really going to have to learn that over a period of time, like we all did. So the next area we asked about was employment. And do you get help from your family around employment? And so we asked parents, does your child have any difficulties with employment? And the number one answer was they have a hard time living up to work expectations. And that can be getting there on time. That can be not talking back to your employer. It could be dressing appropriately. We don't really know. It was a big bucket. Some of them had problems filling out job applications. My son used to have a really hard time with that. He just got confused with forms. Some have a hard time following directions. And then about 1 in 8 reported that their child had a hard time finding a job and then keeping it. And we asked again, how do you help? And 40% of the parents said I coached them. You know, they encounter a difficulty and I walk them through what to do. I provide emotional support. They drive them to work. And almost 1 in 4 said, I wake them up so they can get to work. I'm sure a lot of people are saying, been there, done that.
Yeah, and so young people, employment difficulties and help from parents, 36% said, no, I'm able to find a job and keep it. That's great that they have 36% there. 14% hard time filling out job applications. Personally, my mom actually really helped me fill out all the Indeed stuff, and you know, I'm very independent, but she was there for me. 27% said I can only work part-time. and 16% said I've been unable to find a job. How do your parents help? 29% checked off the box that they provide emotional support. 23% said I'm doing it without help. 23% said they coach about work expectations, and 21% said they provide transportation to work. I think that it's a home run if you have all four of these boxes checked off. You know, there are some parents out there that really provide a lot of support, and it's good to take advantage of that.
So then we asked about giving advice. And remember, we have 7 findings, so this is number 4. What topics should parents give advice about, if any? And so we asked that of parents, and the number one thing was medical issues, and that's the how to get your medication. There might be questions about treatment, and parents always end up, I think, well, not always, but often end up explaining what they know so that it makes better sense. How to fix things, that's a universal thing. I know generation to generation, we all end up with our first situation where we have to fix something on our own, and so who do we call? Mom or dad, right? Financial advice at 25%. This surprised me that parents said that their child sought advice about relationships. And during the survey, we made sure that relationships was defined as relationships with, a friend, relationships with a colleague, as well as romantic relationships. So it's a bigger bucket. And then 1 out of 5 said that their child sought advice about employment. Def?
So the theme question: what topics do you ask your parents about? 63% emotional support. That is tremendously big, and it is something we all need support with is emotional needs. I know that from the beginning of my life, my mom was there for me, emotionally for me, and then financial advice. 35%. How to fix things, 34%. Medical issues, 32%. And relationship advice, 21%. All of these are really, really good topics. And it's important to always, have your kids supported in all these areas, but especially emotional support.
And again, going back to the original question that the researchers asked parents, how often do you talk to your child? And some of them were talking every day. Well, of course, they're going to say, well, gee, this doesn't work. How do I fix it? And I'm not really sure what to do about my doctor said this, or all of those kinds of things. If you're talking on a regular basis, you're more likely to be able to, have a conversation about some of these topics. So number 5.
The piece that I just wanted to add, Lisa, in the chat box, Kimberly said that it's really good to see that youth are stating that they want emotional support too. That was a piece of a finding that she had noticed. And then I did want to also add that the relationship advice is not just a romantic relationship, but also relationship for social relationships. So again, that makes sense also with what's going on kind of for our young people with friendships and peers. So thank you, Kimberly, for mentioning that as well.
Exactly. Thank you very much. Excuse me. So the 5th area we asked about was the relationship you have with your child. And we specifically wanted to know, do you feel close to one another? So we asked parents, are you and your child close? And 66% said, 2/3, we are. And another quarter of them said, we're somewhat close. And so again, that goes back to the original findings about this age group and their parents. Deb?
And what's really interesting is that when the young people were asked this question, it was almost identical, very close, 67%, and somewhat close, 25%. But on the parent side, it's 66% and 25%. So I mean, it's almost identical. And that's really amazing that these young adults feel that way with their parents. Yeah.
Exactly. And Meri and I've had a lot of conversations. We have children with similar issues to some extent, and we're both firm believers that if that relationship is close and strong and solid, that you're much more able to say, the awkward things, the uncomfortable things that need to be said and no one else is going to say them. Like, don't wear that shirt anymore. You shouldn't, when you talk to your boss next time, try to phrase it this way, or whatever those things are. If the relationship is close, you're much more able to do those things.
A comment came up also in the chat box where somebody had mentioned that the parent always offers the support to the young person and allows their young person to decide, right, what type of support they need. And I just wanted to add to something that you had said, Lisa. Often in systems and in different roles, young people, because they're adults, going back to that piece, the age over 18, right, there is often a push to make the decision for yourself. But we're a firm believer in my family, and I know Deb and Lisa share the same piece, where we bring information home to discuss and then make decisions. And we would do that if there was not a mental health diagnosis, right? So again, being able to teach our young adults to be great advocates for themselves, to include families, I think is a great piece to be able to shift the cultural piece that I think the systems really want to get to support families, but it is difficult often when there's young adults that they want to make their own decisions.
Exactly. So, and if you're talking every day, you have a lot of time to talk about it. So going back to that particular thing. So then we ask an opinion question. And the opinion question, so most of these questions have been experience questions. What do you do? Of the young adult, what do you do? And this is an opinion question, because we believe that young people are the experts about their lives and parents are the experts about their families. And so we try to always, when we construct surveys, ask questions and say, we really want your opinion on this so we can understand it better. So based on their own experience, but also their own opinions, we asked, what's the most helpful role that parents can take with their young adult children? So the number one answer from parents was listen to them and love them, but especially listen to them. I know my younger son, if I was distracted, he would say, you're not listening. And it would be the number one thing he wanted. He wanted my mostly undivided attention so that I could hear him out. And it helped him a lot to be able to just talk and have someone listen. I didn't even have to advise him, but just listen to him. The number two answer was make sure treatment continues. And the question was phrased, especially behavioral health treatment. So make sure that whatever treatment that you've agreed upon with the prescriber, the therapist, goes forward. So it might be continuing medications, it might be continuing in therapy, or maybe it would take a new form. Maybe the young person would say, well, gee, I don't want to do that anymore. With my own son, I know when he got to be a certain age, he said, I'm happy to continue the medication. I see it helps me sleep. I see it helps me pay attention. I feel like I've been in therapy since the day I was born, and I need a break from therapy. So we negotiated that. But he did continue treatment. He didn't continue the identical treatment regimen that he had when he was 15 and 16. And so we were able to have that conversation. I was able to express my worries about stopping treatment altogether. And he was able to express his feelings that he was left without choices. He wanted to be one of the people who was choosing all of these options or rejecting them. What parents said that you won't see on the youth side is it was important to encourage or push your child forward. I know that we hear a lot, I'm sure people here have had that experience, about young people who might sit and watch too many video games or not get out and do different things. So that push your child to do some things. Why don't you go here and do this? Why don't you take one class at community college? Why don't you do whatever? Parents thought that was a really important role for them to take. And then making sure that their young person graduates high school. You probably have seen the data. Young people with emotional disabilities, quote, quote, which is how the education system defines it, have the highest dropout rate and the lowest graduation rate. So if somebody is not doing that kind of support and advocating and all the things that it takes to get there, parents are very well aware that might not happen. So making sure that those things are in place so that their young person gets a diploma or diploma equivalent.
So what's the best role parents can take? The young people say 56% listen and give advice when asked. That's the highest one. And personally, I have to agree with that. That is, um, when you have a parent who listens and gives advice, it builds the relationship, it builds trust, and I truly have that in my family, which is something I can really attest to. It's 46% makes sure that treatment continues. Also really high. These are great. Offer emotional support and relationship advice, 44%. When your youth, when I open up to my mom about relationship advice and emotional support, she's always there for me. And it's just super important to be there for your kid in terms of that. And then support to get your diploma and education, 42%. So these are all really high. Young people all checked all of these up. So it's good finding.
So I want to just sort of make a comment here. I probably should have at the beginning. When we first went to do this study, we had a lot of conversations with young people and with parents. And if you ask a young person, do you want your parent involved after you turn 18? You're going to get a very different answer than if you parse it out like we did here. Would you like your parent to be able to help you figure out how to get prescriptions refilled? Would you like your parent to help you figure out how to set up a bank account or whatever it is? So the different areas in which we asked these questions were the areas in which we had the original conversation. And as you can see, we're getting very different answers than if we had a single poll and said to parents, should you be involved after your child turns 18? And if we said to young people, should your parent be involved? If it was an up, down, yes, no question, we probably would be getting very different answers from the answers that we did get in this study. So the last area is stigma. And I will tell you, after having done so many surveys, we've done 20 surveys or something, if we don't ask about stigma, everybody brings it up. Young people bring it up. Parents bring it up. People write us stories in the open-ended comments about things that happened to them that were incredibly hurtful because of their child's behavioral health needs. And so we try always now, having learned our lesson, to ask a question about stigma and the impact that it has on families. So we asked parents, how does society stigmatize you, the parents of youth with behavioral health needs? And the number one answer was, we get excluded. We're not invited to events. We're given the cold shoulder when we go to community events. So the number one answer was, we're excluded. Following that very closely was blaming. We feel like professionals blame us, and we feel like extended family blames us. My mother-in-law will get that sort of comment. My mother-in-law thinks I should have been able to have controlled my child's behavior. My cousin said, if that were my child, they wouldn't be doing that. And so those are the kinds of comments that families experience pretty routinely, and they identify as one of the ways in which they feel stigmatized. And then coming up right after that was that professionals do not show enough empathy. Going from having a minor child, to having a young adult child in your household, it's hard for everybody. It's hard for the child, it's hard, or the young adult, it's hard for the parent. Everybody is trying to figure out the new role. Everybody is trying to figure out how to be helpful. Parents work really, really, really hard to get supports in place. They're terrified those supports are going to crash or fall by the wayside. Meri's going to talk a little bit about, when we talk about strategies, about unreceptive adult services often is as young people move from having child-trained providers, whether it's a pediatrician to an adult doctor or a child-trained therapist to somebody who is in the adult world. And families said, we just don't see enough empathy for all that's on our shoulders and all we're going through. That's
How does society, yeah, sorry. How does society stigmatize young people with behavioral health needs? Well, there are so many. I mean, me personally, I have been very stigmatized with what I have. Many people need to understand that many people need to understand behavioral health needs. More education is needed in general for society to understand what these situations are, so that they don't judge wrongly and that they know how to include those people as equally as others. Their needs are brushed aside and ignored was 60%. That was the highest one. Schools do not protect enough from bullying, 40%.
Dev, I don't know if I can't hear you.
I can't hear you, Dev. Dev, can you hear us? I don't know if he can hear us. Oh, we lost him. All right, then I'll just pick up where he was. So students, young people also said that schools do not protect them enough from bullying, and that's another way that they're picked
Lisa?
out and stigmatized. Yeah.
Lisa, it's Gail. I think Deb is back.
Okay,
I'm
Dev, are you back?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. Okay.
Okay.
All right, so go to the second bullet. I was just starting.
Okay, so the second bullet, schools do not protect enough from bullying. 40%. That's so high for bullying. People don't show enough empathy, 29%. And media and social media paints a flawed picture of them, 35%.
I will say that the media and social media comment comes up with almost every survey we've done with youth. They're very hyper aware of what's on social media, much more than families are. And they have a lot of strong feelings about that. If you ask them about commercials too, for various psychiatric medications, they have strong feelings about that as well. So it's pretty interesting. So, all right, so we're up to another, well, it's actually a word cloud this time. So what we'd like you to do is we've just gone through some things that we know about young people. And we also, if you remember, went over some basic facts that we know from researchers about young people. So what comes to mind for you? What word or phrase when you think about young people in this age group? And the more people that choose the same word, the more that word will be larger. So one person chooses a word, then it's going to be smaller. And as people choose the same word, it will be larger. We have learning. Awesome. That was one of mine. Resilient is coming up as being one of the top words that comes to people's minds. Support, because we talked a lot already about how families support. Tough. Learning. Needing guidance. So there was a lot of discussion about giving advice here. Innovative. Tough. I like tough. I think you have to be. I think inside you have to be able to be tough in order to, come out the other side of all the things that people go through. What pops out to you, Meri?
So I just threw a few things that were in the chat box. So in the chat box, I added it to the word cloud: isolated, individual, unique. I thought that was a great one. Inspiring. Lori had mentioned that was pretty cool to see as well. I like the idea also of exploring. Lots of times I think we hear, young people will go in and out of different things that they like or don't like, but really that exploring is a piece that's there. And then I also like somebody put in future, because I think that's another piece that comes up for me.
Exactly.
Navigating really got a big one too.
Navigating, absolutely. So true. And it's a whole different set of things to navigate when you move into the adult services world. All right, over to Meri.
Great. So we are going to talk a little bit about strategies for change. And this is where we have been able to use some strategies directly with our staff and also as an organization. So strategies for using information, make sure that the staff that you're connected to or other families or caregivers that you're connected to have information about young people from families and youth. So a few things that we've done at PAL is we have had topics of discussion in our staff meetings, And we share at staff meetings what we've learned and what we've received from our data, so we can both encourage them to have conversations with us as a team, but also to really ask questions if there's something that didn't make sense. Again, we have Deb, who's our young adult leader with Youth Move with PAL, and also the ages and parents that we have within our own staff. Teaching staff ways to use information. So those of you that have known Lisa for a long time, she's kind of like that data geek in many ways, in a positive way, but really has shown us as staff where I feel like I'm a person that really builds relationships, goes out and uses relationships, but the data really plays a story. So I'm able to, and other staff with Lisa's guidance, are able to use that information and percentages of different data points to really kind of have conversation within different meetings that they're going into, or conversations. We do a lot of posting on social media. We try to get information out there. That's one of our avenues of marketing, but also getting people to really understand what both parents are saying and young people are saying. And then we also encourage our staff to share posts, because you never know. I think Kimberly or Danielle had mentioned that it feels like the stigma of mental health or behavioral health is still there. So we want to really encourage the sharing of good information of what young people and families are saying to us. We also create and use short videos. One of the pieces that we started within the COVID kind of time is that we do Facebook Live, very short Facebook Live, featuring staff that talk about key points, why it's important, looking at some of the pieces that are there. We've also included Youth Move in that. So Dev and his colleague staff have done Facebook Lives on what it's like from their perspective, but also as a sibling of another child that maybe has behavioral or mental health needs. So just another avenue to really think about sharing information.
And if I can just add, people they don't automatically know how to use data. So if we give everybody the data point that some large percentage of families say that their young person comes to them for advice, right? If I'd had that data when I was talking to that provider who was denigrating a parent who used the word baby, it would have been so great. I could have said, but so many parents report that, you know, their young person comes to them for advice, or whatever data I would have. One sentence, one key thing, as data, as Meri calls it, a data point, can really change the discussion.
And I would also just add to, Lisa, if you mentioned, we have learned that our partners within the state, also our systemic partners and providers, they really look to us because we get a lot of responses for our surveys from both parents and young people, that they will also use our data to push an agenda. So just another avenue for all of you to also think about. So we also present information in a variety of ways, and we try to make sure that we can reach different audiences via infographics. So that's one piece that we were able to do. That's okay. Infographics to be able to get information very quick, kind of colorful, again, in a very marketable way. One of the infographics that we did do is on telehealth. Everybody had thought right away that telehealth was an amazing piece that had happened, but though we agree with that, there has also been some challenges for parents, like, did you have internet that was stable? Did you have a place that you were able to get into that meeting or conversation? So where there were also some barriers. So again, parents told us, and we created infographics to kind of get that data out there. Another thing that we did is we created tip sheets. Tip sheets that were able to be pulled by parents in the language of parents so that they can really truly understand. We did some on sharing your family's mental health story. We also did another on school avoidance and anxiety, because we noticed with the pandemic that really kind of had an uptick a lot. We did one, you know, what would you do if you had contact with the police? Again, trying to really meet families with what they were telling us and creating tip sheets. Another thing that we do is we send out a newsletter. Newsletters are very important for us as well, and often we will highlight a point or two that we really feel that needs to go out and get people to kind of have conversation regarding a data point. Again, social media I want to mention, and then videos have been a really big piece for us in both marketing, but getting our information out there on a pretty consistent and regular basis.
I just want to comment something I say a lot to both providers and decision makers in our state, and they are really lagging behind. I'm sure people in this virtual room will understand this far better. Since before COVID, parents were moving online. Since COVID, they moved online in droves. Facebook has some data about how Facebook groups, so it could be a group around transition age youth, parenting a transition age youth. Those Facebook groups, according to Facebook, have exploded. There's many more people who have joined them, and there's many more groups that match different kinds of needs. So remember I said I have fostered labs. Well, I'm on one. I'm on a Facebook group about what to do with you when you have labs. So if you have a need or an interest, there's a Facebook group for you. And I'm not doing an advertisement for Facebook, but I'm just saying that families are there and families can talk to each other 24/7. You can post something at night, and you can get a variety of opinions from a variety of other people. So getting information in a visual way, like the things that are on your screen, that you can then put into some of these groups and share with families besides the conversation, really that's what people are looking for. They're not looking for a report or a slide deck in the same way that they used to be. They're really looking for something that has adapted itself to a social media platform.
Another area that we also support is we bring to policy tables. So one of the pieces that we often bring, so for instance, Devs sits with our statewide young adult council and has discussions of services for adults and young adults and young people. So he sits there and he's able to bring information there. We do hold monthly trainings for family leaders, which I have to say, again, since kind of the Zoom world and the ability to get online, we've almost tripled the amount of family members that are coming to get information, and family leaders across our state. We've also welcomed people from outside of the state. That has been another area that we've been able to kind of blend people in from different areas because it's free if you have lived experience. So that's something we've done. Another piece that's been really important for us in all of this also is the discussions that we have with our COIN group, which is with the Department of Education in our state. And I urge you from other states to really look that up, COIIN. It stands for Collaborative Improvement and Information Networks. And it's connected to education departments across the country, and there's many people that are connected. They would love to collaborate with family organizations or Youth Move or other young adult advocacy organizations to really get the information of what parents and young people are going through. And then for many of us, we also sit with child welfare, behavioral health, and also juvenile justice, again, to be able to push and move the different things that we feel are important so that people know kind of what's happening now with families and what are they telling us.
So Deb, I don't know if you want to comment on SIAC, but I know from just over the years, one of the things that has been frustrating to the state agencies that serve children and youth is that handoff to adult services because they don't have the same language, they don't have the same goals, they don't really have a place for families, they have a place for the identified client. So I don't know if you want to talk about the work you've done there a little bit.
Yeah, the work that I do there is incredible because we're all in like the same. We have this comfort agreement, right, that allows us to just be really safe and open with conversations, and we talk about a lot of different things. And we also invite a lot of different speakers to come as well. And we have discussions on those, speak on the topics that the speakers bring. And it's just a great place to be, honestly, to just have young adults join and speak their word, speak their mind, I mean.
I think the other piece that we see in our state, and Dev, you can add into this too, is that our mental health and behavioral health system really wants to hear from young adults and bring that up there. So that's been something that's been co-chaired by young adults to be able to talk about, what are some of the changes that we want to make. And we all know that the culture of the system takes time to shift, but to be able to have young adults like Dev and the two other co-chairs that he connects with is pretty amazing, because not only do they have that level at the policy table, but they're heard, and the commissioner and deputy commissioner would come in, right, to meet them. And I think that's what we often talk about here. We're sitting with the assistant commissioner in the Department of Education in Massachusetts. We have direct lines both to the Commissioner of Child Welfare and Juvenile Justice. So I'll just throw out, we're able to even talk about, in our state, we are kind of in this debate now and watching what Washington State did with school resource officers. And that's something that we're able to really talk and say, this is what we're hearing from what parents are saying, or what it feels like for young people that are in schools with that. So it's a conversation and it's information to bring in. So it's definitely a critical place to be, but it's also, I think, one of the things that I feel that PAL has been able to get with the survey results is our reputation is held that we have a large number of parents and young people that answer our surveys. So when they know that a survey is coming, they're waiting for the results just as much as we're waiting for the results so that we can go for the next step.
Exactly. And Meri sits on the Family Advisory Committee to our Child Welfare Department. And I don't know if transition has specifically come up there, Meri, but I do know that we've both been involved with committee work as well as some staff folks with juvenile justice. And we're very involved with raising the age higher in Massachusetts so that the end, children didn't go into the adult prison system or the adult criminal justice system at 17. We've raised that age up successfully by doing some work in collaboration with the folks over there.
The other things I want to mention too, and we've talked, there's been a few pieces that are here, but we do talk about the racial disparities. So it's very often, I know Lisa talked about LGBTQ youth identifying themselves, but also we feel that one of the biggest impacts we've had is in some of our emergency departments and how people that identified as Black or Brown felt how they were treated. So again, within PAL, we're really kind of in the and we hear from parents on kind of the questions to ask. So there's a lot of work that goes in there, but it really has been a mover and a shaker for us with the data. So just again, if you're in your state and that's something that you can do or consider, definitely consider reaching out to PAL.
I will say that frequently in this survey as well, in the open-ended question at the end, we say, what else would you like to tell us? And we usually get one or two parents who say, I would like to bring my experiences to make change. Here's my email. So even though we try to make these surveys anonymous, there's often a person who says, well, that wasn't enough for me to share my experience. I'd like to step up and be at some of these committee meetings or speak publicly.
So some of the barriers, one of the biggest pieces, and many of you here know this, and you're probably shaking your head, everybody uses different language. How people talk about young adults, how parents are identified, the alphabet soup that's kind of there in figuring out what your family or young person is getting is extremely different. So that's a big challenge and a barrier for us when we talk about this interagency work that we're doing, that everybody really uses their own language and it doesn't conform to another state system. Systems also don't think they need sometimes family involvement. So again, that's another push of trying to get get the connection in there to be able to push that through. And then often Dev and I or Dev and Lisa will tag team to kind of show that parent and young person's perspective for us as a family organization is crucial, critical, and we try to push that. So that's also a huge piece that's there. Kimberly, I also see that you wrote that the wrong person in the wrong seat is a huge in your state, and I would agree. I think that's also something in our partnerships that we've noticed is kind of who's our champion and who's aligning with parent and young people voice. So thank you so much for mentioning that, because that is definitely real. And that's our third point, is that, you know, sometimes the wrong person in the wrong seat, and then what is that amount of time where nothing changes? And for sometimes it also goes backwards, right? So it can slide back a little bit. And all of us have seen that in our states, and that's why it's so important for both family advocacy and young adult advocacy that is there. It's also really important, I just want to mention, as far as language, there was a lot of conversation, I know, with my own children about mental illness versus mental health. And for my kids, they felt very comfortable with calling it mental health. In their mind, the word illness connected to cancer and something that they couldn't get over. We've noticed also that the word recovery versus resiliency has been kind of a conversation. And I just want to go back to what Lisa had said, sensing that our young people go to bed at 17 and then 18 when a system is talking completely different can be very overwhelming. We talk about what's overwhelming for the parent, but for a young person, I remember for my own son going into kind of the adult services, he came out, and I remember one of the first things he said to me was, "Mom, do you know that people with mental illness die sooner?" And I said, I remember looking at him, I said, "What are you gearing that towards? People can have different things with heart disease, with blood pressure, right? When you think of health." But it stuck with him that he had heard something, and it was almost a life sentence rather than an opportunity, right? So again, really thinking about language and language for engagement and continued engagement is huge.
So I just want to make a comment on the wrong person. I'm a big believer that you still need to do the steps. Even if you meet with somebody who you know is not going to be sympathetic, you still need to have the meeting, and you still need to say what you need to say and be clear. We believe this, families tell us this, we think this is a priority or whatever. And even if nothing happens, because I've been doing this long enough that I will then meet somebody 3 years later who was in that meeting, but at the time they weren't in a position of power, and they heard what I had to say, or they heard what the young person had to say. And it was good to have done it just for those particular reasons. Sometimes also we bring staff with us who are still learning some of the ropes, and they learn how it is that you can respectfully disagree or respectfully push. And so it's really important to go ahead and say what we know is true based on what families and youth tell us, and based on what our organization values highly and what our organization wants to see happen. So I just want to, it's not a futile exercise. Frequently something good can happen. Meri, cut you off. What were you going to say?
No, and I think that, no, that's great. And one of the pieces I just want to make a shout out, Bonnie, I think it's Bonnie, I'm kind of going back and forth. Bonnie had mentioned, or maybe Kimberly had mentioned, is, you know, sometimes within juvenile justice and child welfare, people don't want the parent involved because they see the parent as the person that's blamed. And I think that is a great point. And that takes, we often say in our organization that it takes really an experienced, savvy person with a really thick skin to be able to go in and push to get that advocacy piece there. Sometimes a thicker skin than maybe another system that has been a little bit more open. So thank you, Bonnie, for that comment. I couldn't agree more. How parents and youth can collaborate. Family and young people can strategize, like Lisa said just now, together. Family-run organizations and youth organizations can train together. Again, what we had said is just kind of modeling that partnership, modeling that expertise. And I know many other family organizations do that as well. And then make sure youth and young adults have centers that are connected to family-run organizations. So in our state, we have some great access centers, and access centers are great, or kind of a place for people to go, and also having a parent component. So we've really kind of thought out of the box in Massachusetts to try to make some of those happen. And it's been a benefit for both the parents, but also the young people. And again, I want to go back to some of the pieces that Dev had mentioned earlier. I will go directly to Dev, and I've got at maybe a situation that's stuck, and I'd say, how do you think we could shift to kind of explain and form a different partnership or the next step partnership for this parent and young adult, because sometimes that can be a bit of a bump. And I think just really thinking out of the box together is important. So there's a lot to do, not enough time, but collaboration is a key piece in that next step.
Exactly. And I just want to mention on the training together, it seems like the distant past, because we haven't completely, in our state anyway, had all our meetings returned to being in person. But frequently before the restrictions from COVID, we would be involved with a training, and somebody might present data, and there would be a parent who would comment on it and offer their experiences, and a youth. And of course, you always, give people the opportunity who feel ready, because sharing your story publicly is a pretty scary thing. I often say to people, for a parent to say, my child is out of control at home publicly, that's a scary thing to say, because right away some people are going to judge you. But the parents and the youth often do not agree on the panels. And Meri has had a lot to do with selecting which youth and which families. Maybe you can say something about that, Meri, that would be on a panel. But it often ends up being a really good presentation if everybody isn't sort of, quote, towing the party line.
And another thing that comes up too, and Dev, I don't know if you want to jump in after I mention this, but I think also with either committees or even on panels, we have within our Youth Move piece where young people will say, I want to tell you what was helpful, and I want to tell you what was harmful, right? And often those pieces may be a little bit different than what the parent says. Both would have value, but from the perspectives of different people. And that's something that we really noticed. And I will add that one of the things that comes, and I want to just connect it to both the partnership or collaboration, we can have young people sit on a panel or to be able to give feedback and say, this was something that was harmful. It didn't help me. This is why it didn't help me. But they are probably one of the best people that I have heard say, I'd like to come up and tell you some solutions of what that would have looked like to make it better, right? What would have helped? What could have been that next step that would have possibly allowed me to engage with you a little bit better, right? Like, how could you have involved me in the choices that were coming? And that has been a really big eye opener for us in Massachusetts systemically with being able to do that. And I would say on the flip side, we also have, when we think about collaboration, we also are very diverse in our panels or our ways that we do that. So we have diverse families. We might have single parents. We may have grandparents raising a grandchild also, and trying to figure out maybe two dads or two moms, having somebody that identifies as trans. So wherever we feel that we kind of need to move the messaging is really important where we would come to. Dev, I don't know if you want to add anything on that piece with the Youth Move.
I just think it's important to be open to all the youth's needs. And I also believe that it's important to give leadership opportunities to all the youth that, at least the ones that I work with. I supervise two young adults out of 5, and I always try and give them leadership skills. I also think that collaboration for me at least was a huge thing that I just love to do in this field. It's super important to me to network and collaborate with people, because that's just how stories are going to get spread, and it'll destigmatize mental health issues the more we collaborate.
The other thing that I just want to mention too, and Kimberly, you had noted this as well, and I just want to come back to it, that sometimes having the wrong person right at the table, and often maybe that's not as knowledgeable, it does take a lot of kind of strategic thinking of who can handle those next levels. And I also want to just say that the other thing that we do is we prep families and we prep young adults. So we're a family organization, like many of you also, if you're connected, that don't believe in not prepping families or young people to what they're going to be doing. So that prep and being able to know what the message is, what the panel, what the discussion would be, also to be able to support them. And oftentimes we may even rehearse, depending, because we definitely talk about, what are the situations that come up and what are the challenges that are there. And there's always going to be those questions that come up that maybe parents don't want to answer or a young person doesn't want to answer. And having a way out of that is really important. So that's something else we also do when we do the partnership. I know we have about 15 minutes left. We've got one more piece of a question, and then would love to
I don't know why
would love to open it up also to questions, and we can answer questions to any of you live as well.
Right. So this is an interesting, and I'm sorry, we had practiced on this, and this ended up being, I thought I cleared the data, but what you have to do in this particular exercise is you'll have all of the different choices. The question is, what strategy should be used to change the conversation about young people and families? And you rank them. You put your top choice on, you'll see some arrows on your app, and you just rank them. Is it language? Is that your number one? Which is what Meri and Dev and I have been fooling around with this, and I meant to clear it. So just rank them, move them up and down until they're like you like them, and then click on submit. And while we're doing that, we thought we would open this up for questions. If you could use do you want people to use their hand raise? How would you like to do this, Meri?
Yeah, either hand raise or unmute, either way would be fine. I think people are also voting live, Lisa. I think they're changing some pieces, so that may be
That's
also
great. No, I see that happening. That's great. That's
this
great.
is Kimberly from Virginia. I wanted to make a comment of where I stated that having a knowledgeable parent at the table has been something that I've experienced personally. When I was advocating for one of our children within the county, and being told that I didn't know anything, and actually I was the one that was providing them with all the research and everything that we had done, trying to find mental health supports, not only for our child, but for the rest of our family. Long story, but making it short, on the professional side, once I became licensed and a professional and came to the table, they were like, oh, you do know what you're talking about. It's like, no kidding. Now you have to work with me on a professional side and be respectful.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a piece of paper. Like, they treat the families like they don't know what their lived experience is and what the children have gone through. And that's one of my pet peeves. Is like, you don't know unless you've walked in their shoes and in what the families have gone through.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right. You're reminding me, a friend of mine did a presentation of a group of parents. It wasn't on this topic, it was on residential programs, but to a group of providers. And she had everybody sit in the front, and those placards that has your name in front of you? Every one of them said, mom, 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 mom. Because how many people here have been called mom, even though you have a name? You're at a meeting and they say, mom says, what do you think, mom? Whatever. So that's what they did. And then they went through and answered, I think, the first question, and she had everybody flip their placards, and on the back there was Susie Smith, and another one Janie Jones PhD, and another one BP Meri Marino, MD or whatever. And it blew their minds because people are so used to putting families under this one term, the mom, and it was a really good exercise. I've always remembered that.
Meri, we had a meeting like that up in Northern Virginia, and one of the providers or the directors of the mental health provider facility said, now how do you expect to handle all of these clients?
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, give us a challenge and we'll rise to it, because we have lived experience. We've been there with the families and we can support them and offer them the support that they need, because we've had children in residential or in a group home or with trauma or whatever their story is. and they're
Mhm.
not a piece of paper. They're a
No, I
human
think
being.
you make some good points, Kimberly. And the one thing that I want to add, and then I'm going to come over to you, Bonnie, is, it's really interesting when we started doing the juvenile justice work. I had walked into a meeting that was being held like in a gymnasium. And, I often said, I remember calling Lisa and saying, I look like a social worker today. I'm going to really make this meeting good, right? But I didn't tell them who I was for almost 8 weeks. And I kept showing up for the meeting and I kept making statements, but I didn't say I was a mom. And I wasn't really sure. And then when I did say it, it was really interesting because I was outnumbered by so many, and it took many years of collaboration to get to that next point. But one of the pieces that was, I think, really eye-opening for me, and we at that point had leadership within our state that was really willing to listen, also of what was working or not working, and just having real conversation of what that was. I'm not sure that if I went in there as the parent in the beginning that I would have been even seen what and hear what was going on. So it really is that kind of shared piece that appears to happen not just in your state, but in multiple states. So I just want to really thank you for your voice and all of the many voices that you bring to the table. I do want to go over to Bonnie. Bonnie, if you want to unmute, we'd love to hear your question.
Okay, I guess one of my biggest questions is because with my organizations, one of the biggest things that I'm hoping to do is because the county that I live in, I've kind of classified it as like the good old boys club because we're considered rural when you look at where I live and work versus say Atlanta. Even though we're like literally walking distance to Chattanooga, Tennessee, we're still on that rural side. And a lot of the things that I've seen with the juvenile justice and like with DFACS, child welfare and stuff is how do we change the language with the people that don't see anything wrong with the way they are, I wouldn't even say working with these families, but more handling these families because they're not giving the families a say so. They're not coming in and saying, okay, is there a mental health diagnosis that's causing these behavioral challenges with this child? It's automatic. Your child did this, your child's consequences are this. We're going to pull your child from your home because you're obviously not controlling your child. How do we get to a point where we can change that conversation to where it's more of a team effort to help the child and help the family to where they're not facing separation and they're not facing legal, consequences for something that is directly tied into the child's mental health challenges?
Yeah, and I think your question is actually timely, Bonnie, I have to say, right, with what's coming. So I'll just give you kind of a few shout outs. So first, I would say, I identify as a parent and I don't share in every, because doesn't define my family. My children are adopted. I remember when my children were adopted, the first thing that I was told when my child had a mental health diagnosis was, it would be really easy to just return him to the department, child welfare. And I was like, wait a minute, I adopted my child. That's not what I'm looking for, right? These are my children. This is moving forward, whether, yes, I understand it wasn't birth, but these are my children. So right now, I would really urge you to look up the Family First legislation. Child welfare nationally has to include family voice and family experience. So there's federal legislation that has gone through Family First, and you'll see it. I know within Massachusetts, we have to be involved at policy level. We're trying to figure out, people are kind of ruffling feathers a little bit because they know that it has to be a check mark that it's done in states. So that's one thing that I would just kind of challenge you to look up, because there's an opportunity right now there that has come up kind of with some federal legislation. That doesn't mean that every state's going to do it the same way, totally understand, but I'm wondering if you could use it for leverage. Another area for juvenile justice, we're connected to, in our state, the Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative. I'll put that in the chat box. or JDAI. I know Georgia has some initiatives with that. And one of the things also within their guiding principles is they have to be involved in like a family involvement piece and a youth involvement. I'm not saying that they're going to like welcome you with open arms, but it could be something, and I would tap on some of the other states that are here too that have been connected to that can also be a next step to be able to really support. One of the things, the last thing that I will say, and Lisa may want to add into this too, we really gear families up to be connected to their legislators, because it's really important to have families go to legislative people so that you know who's going to be in office, and then you can decide. And not that this is a political conversation, but there were times where we were trying to push forward very similar, Bonnie, like our initiative with maybe juvenile justice, child welfare, maybe even behavioral health or Medicaid, and who is kind of in that leadership role is a big piece of why we've been able to, and I would add that when we have a partner that believes and champions family voice and youth voice, we're pushing fast, furious as we can get involved, because as soon as you get a seat, you can lose a seat. So for us, we always go for at least 2 seats. We don't go for less than 2 seats. I mean, we love 5 seats, right? But that's another area that I would just throw out to you. And definitely reach out to PAL anytime. I'll put our contact information in the chat box. But Lisa, you may have another thought also, as Bonnie mentioned.
So 3 things. Start with the language first. We're a big believer in, they say, well, I'll just give you an example. There was a deputy commissioner of education that was in a meeting I was in, and she kept saying student, and we were trying to get her to say child and family, because if you're a student, their responsibility ends when school's out, right? And we were talking about communication between school, home, and community, and she kept wanting to say student. We're done at 3 or 2:30 or whatever it was. So every time she said student, I would say back to her child and family over and over again. It took a long time, it took 18 months, and she was saying child and family. But what happened in that dynamic is, in that meeting, there were pediatricians, there were other people who believed that the language that I was using reflected what they wanted to see happen. And they started using that language. So I would go sit next to the person who was saying my language. No, you can't do that in Zoom, but you know what I mean? So there was this shift that took a long time to happen. That's happened at other levels too. We had somebody in a powerful position who wanted to use the word distressed child, and it just made me think of distressed jeans. I hated it. So we kept saying child with needs, and he ended up switching too, but it does take a long time. That's just my 2 cents on language. Meri had an experience, and she can tell you about this maybe at better detail. So I'll just say it quickly and go on to the legislative part. Where when we started doing the juvenile justice work, they were required in the Boston area, which is our big city, for a parent to be at the table. And she was told by somebody, I'm required to have you here, but sit down and shut up. I don't want you to open your mouth. So that was the reception she got. And we knew it was going to be hostile going in. We were prepared that it was going to be hostile going in. And Meri ended up sort of, what do I say, talking a little, talking a lot, but she was very respectful the entire time. She made really, really sure she was very respectful. And if she was talked without, any kind of lashback, she was thankful. I mean, all the things that you do in order to be able to, use the tools that you have in order to be able to, make next time a little bit easier. But sometimes when you start, it's hard. And we've been there. It's hard. And the last thing, just to pick up on the legislature, is families don't know they work for us. Your state senator and legislator, they work for you. And we have a very bad crisis right now in Massachusetts with kids not being able to get into mental health services. There's weeks and weeks and months and months and months. So families on their own, and then with our encouragement, but we just say, hey, that was great, you did that. That's the encouragement. Started calling legislators. So we did a legislative hearing, which means you educate legislators, last May, and we had 2 parents talk about their experiences. And then the legislators were commenting, and they were saying, I've had 2 constituents call. I beat you. I've had 3. Oh, I've only had 1. And that wouldn't have happened unless the parents were calling the legislators and saying, I'm having this really hard time. I don't know if you can help or not. And remember, the legislators or the legislature appropriates the money and decides which state agencies should get so much money. And there's a lot of money coming into every state from the American Rescue Plan right now. And legislators are not saying to governors and everybody, you decide. They want to say, whether it's a big say or a little say. So right now, that's important. And parents usually feel good. What I usually say to families if they're doing it is let us know, because we like to know which legislator they called or emailed or, whatever. And they're so proud. Hey, I sent a text. I sent an email. I did this. They're so proud. They're pleased that they were able to be proactive, and that makes them feel good. So I just wanted to make those 3 comments.
So I think that many of you, we have less than a minute left. I think we're right at time. So just want to thank you on behalf of PAL for attending this section.
And Youth Move.
And Youth Move, yes, Youth Move Massachusetts, remember Youth Move as well. There's many things happening. I did put our contact information in the chat box. I'm really excited that you're here. There's so much more to do for the Federation today. So just hopefully we will see each other through different sessions and conversations, and would love to connect. On behalf of PAL, we thank you, but we also urge you to not only keep going and doing the great work that you're doing for your family and others, but know that we're a large community across the state. So thank you so much, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Be safe and well.
So much.